For the first 25 days of December, we're going to be doing a readathon for my newest book, Nick. We know this isn't for everyone, so if you don't want us to read you a bedtime story every night, we'll still have our regular vlogs every Tuesday.
But if you do want to come along, then come on! Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are reading chapter 19, Gremlins in Disguise. Nick approached the doll with slow, cautious steps. He knelt down, hesitated, but then scooped it up. He looked into the doll's marble eyes, black as a starless night, and they were spinning back and forth. Although the doll's wood-carved face was smeared, stained, and splintered, Nick still recognized it as the one that belonged to Abigail. "How?" Nick breathed with a shiver. "Do you like it?" came a voice from an inky black shadow off in the corner of the chamber. "Personally, I find it quite clever. Who's there?" Nick didn't even realize he had dropped Abigail's doll. He squinted, but the darkness was too thick to penetrate. A sparse of light then came from the window, a gift from the silver moon as it peeked from behind dense clouds, wilting the shadow and revealing Belsnickel. Quite the precocious elf Mr. McTwizzle is. A forward thinker, one might even say. Belsnickel's thin lips then cracked into a cruel grimace that Nick could feel the goosebumps creeping across his arms, and yet still dumb enough to get caught. Nick's legs felt like they had turned into jelly. He felt frightened and weak, all the makings of a true coward. "What did you—" He took a nervous gulp, watching as Belsnickel prowled around the chamber, taunting him with wicked smiles and frightful cackles. "What did you do with Mr. McTwizzle?" "I followed Lord Avamork's orders, of course." The elf wriggled his fingers, and electricity crackled and black smoke swirled between his raised hands. "Why don't you take a look for yourself?" Nick gazed into the vortex, watching as images appeared within the swirl of dark magic until a whole scene surfaced. A bell chimed, announcing a patron had arrived at Mr. McTwizzle's emporium of fantastic trinkets and toys. Belsnickel walked into the toy shop, donned in a long coat and a stylish hat that covered his ears and even parts of his pasty face. Belsnickel wandered into an aisle, little children scurrying away as they felt an undeniable cold presence that had frightened them. The elf ran his hand along the trinkets and toys displayed upon the shelves, knocking them off and crushing them beneath his boots. But then he stopped, fascinated by a basket of black marbles. Mr. McTwizzle, kind and gentle as he always was, found Belsnickel studying a marble wedged between the clench of a finger and thumb. "What contraption have you come up with now, toy maker?" Mr. McTwizzle reluctantly answered. "I've named them Marbleets." He was even more hesitant to finish. "They are enchanted marbles that can record a voice and repeat it when it spins." Belsnickel stuffed the marble into his coat pocket. "This will come in handy." His glare then shifted to the old shopkeeper. "As for you, Mr. McTwizzle, Lord Avamork knows you've helped the boy. Not just recently, but also 15 years ago." The image sped up into a whirlwind, and a new one emerged from its turmoil within the black smoke. The two elves were now in the back, behind the golden door in the workshop. Nick missed a big chunk of what had happened. All he knew was that the floor was strewn with shattered toys and broken gadgets. Mr. McTwizzle on his knees, his face cut and bloody, while Belsnickel hovered over him. "The boy will prevail." Mr. McTwizzle spat through blood. "Avamork will fall, so long as the boy fights just as the prophecy foretold." Belsnickel shot a force from his hands that left Mr. McTwizzle screaming in terrible spurts of agony. "Well, toy maker, we'll just have to see about that." "You monster!" Nick shouted. "I only wish to be so lucky." Belsnickel slapped his hands together, leaving the vision to crumble into sparkling dust. "How many more people, Nick? How many more people must suffer before you hand over the stone of the Northern Staff? First the nun, then the orphans, Mrs. Pransley and her sweet little girls, and now even the toy maker. Stop this now and spare any more people from becoming harmed." He poked Nick with his words, searching for weakness. "Think of Emma. Think of Gilbert. I would hate to see anything bad happen to them as well." Nick clenched his teeth and then mumbled something incoherent through them. "Hand over the stone, and all will be forgiven," Belsnickel quipped. "I don't have your stupid stone," he yelled. "Very well." Belsnickel stomped on Abigail's doll, breaking it into a million little pieces. "Oh, one more thing." He smiled again. "You might want to check on your friends." He snapped his fingers, vanishing off into thin air. Nick's eyes widened. Emma. Gilbert. He jumped out of the carriage and immediately broke into a run. He ran through the rail cars, each just as void of passengers and just as messy as the one before. The luggage compartments looked like they had all exploded. There were suitcases and briefcases and other such baggage strewn all over the place, with clothes and other belongings spread throughout. Nick fought down in the aisle, kicking fallen luggage out of his way and then charging into the next rail car. That's when he saw it. Dozens upon dozens of little green monsters climbing on top of each other like cockroaches as they fought to break into a forward coach. Nick could barely see through the window of the sliding door and was just able to catch a glimpse of Emma holding the door closed while the tiny, terrifying beast scratched and clawed and pounded it. Pretty girl. Pretty, pretty. The creatures spoke in perfect unison like they shared the same vocal cord. Pretty girl, pretty, pretty. Hey, shouted Nick, catching the little monster's attention. Leave my friends alone, or I'll... The train rocked, swaying Nick into an empty seat. He picked himself back up to find 100 green eyes looking back at him. Or I'll make you regret it. There was a moment of silence, just as 100 eyes, mindlessly blinking, and then all of the little monsters broke out laughing. Oh yeah? Nick puffed out his chest. Well, you aren't nice, and you're very ugly. Shockingly, that seemed to do the trick. The monsters were offended by Nick's remark regarding their attractiveness. They quit laughing, but now slowly crawled toward Nick on all four claws with a low growl vibrating deep in their throats. They all chorused, "Eat him! Eat him! I want to eat him!" Nick broke out into a sweat. "Oh bother," he chirped with a tightening throat. "What have I done?" The monsters charged. Some scurried under seats, others pounced off the backs of seat cushions, and a few stomped on the heads of others to give them a bounce toward Nick. Emma popped out of nowhere, directly behind Nick. She dropped a drained Cracker Barrel, then replaced it with one still containing a drop of magic. "Take us back to our coach," she whispered. Nick and Emma vanished. Moments later they reappeared back in their private coach. Nick went straight for the sliding door, throwing all of his weight against it to keep it closed. The little monsters realized what had happened. They threw themselves against the door, their faces plastered against the square window. They were nasty-looking things, licking the window, wiggling their tongues, and chopping their teeth. The door pounded, but Nick pushed back to keep it shut. What are these things? Gilbert had gotten into his satchel and drew out Mr. McTwizzle's old, hefty book. It took a whole lot of effort for the little mouse to get it out. He flipped it open, using both paws to swish through the oversized pages, one at a time. He stopped on a specific page that was illustrated with the same type of monsters that were ramming at the door as a collective group. Gilbert caught Emma's attention with a squeak. "They're gremlins," she revealed while reading off the title of the page. The creatures known as gremlins are a classification of magical beings known as monsters of the dark. They are the lowest in the chain, and aren't typically an interest of concern unless in a group. It is only in numbers when the creatures can become quite vicious. The gremlin is the most comparable to a cockroach in the sense that if one is seen scavenging through your dumpsters, you could be sure that there could be up to 100 more scurrying beyond the walls of your home. They enjoy making children cry by stealing their toys. They're especially fond of dolls because they can use the clothing for their own as they are typically the same size. Nick threw his whole back to the door. It thumped and bumped from the gremlins' continuous rams. Anything on how to get rid of them? Emma read on. Gremlins love food above all things, spending most of their lives digging in trash cans, as well as shiny object... Food! She turned to Gilbert, who was already smiling as they seemed to have come to the same idea at the same exact time. Gilbert jumped into his satchel, then came crawling back out with a Cracker Barrel. Oh, Gilbert, even as a mouse, you're much smarter than most boys. Gilbert's blush was prominent, even through his fur. He passed the Cracker Barrel off to Emma. Nick eyed the golden bell and then noticed the devious look in Emma's eyes. What are you planning? Stand aside and get ready to run. Emma brought the bell to her lips and whispered, Food. Lots and lots of food. It finally clicked. Nick heaved the sliding door open, and Emma pitched the beaming bell into the horde of gremlins. Boom! An explosion of food blasted through the rail car, doubling, then tripling in growing numbers of different assortments of desserts. There were cookies and danishes, sweet pies and savory pies, candies and tarts, and it only grew in piles upon piles, all appearing in great numbers. When Emma whispered into the Cracker Barrel, she had imagined all the goodies her mother used to sell at her bakery. The food grew in mountains as the gremlins began getting lost in the piles of continuously appearing sweets. Some even swallowed and buried beneath. Gilbert dodged a cherry pie that fell from the ceiling, exploding on the bench exactly where he had been standing. He hopped up onto Nick's shoulder, just as Nick slipped on a banana from an ice cream sundae. He got himself back up, joining Emma. 3 gremlins awaited in the frame of the compartment door, growling. A pumpkin pie fell from the ceiling and took one of them out. 2 left. Emma turned to Nick, and Nick to Emma. Somehow, their brains were linked. The kangaroo hop? She suggested. My thoughts exactly. They performed Emma's father's fighting technique perfectly. So synchronized you would have thought they had been practicing tiresomely for weeks. Nick and Emma jumped with their knee, then brought it back down while raising the other. Pow! They kicked the gremlins in the face, and into a mountain of jello that swallowed them whole. Nick and Emma clapped their hands and then fell into a hug. By the time they pulled apart, desserts had piled up to their knees and it was only climbing higher. They fought their way to the compartment door when food reached up to their waists. Nick was covered in chocolate syrup, crumbs of pie crust, frosting, and God only knows what else. He was sticky and starting to panic. What should we do now? Gilbert shrugged, but Emma suggested, we could use a Cracker Barrel, but there's only one left. The desserts had piled up to his chest, and it was only raining more. Who cares? We need to get off this train. Emma dug through a mountain of rising tarts, eclairs, and other such sweets until she was able to slip her hand into her pocket. She drew out their last Cracker Barrel. By the time she placed the bell to her lips, the desserts had risen up to their chins. Get us off this train. The sweets swallowed them up just as they disappeared. Alright, thanks for reading along with us tonight. Tomorrow we're going to be reading chapter 20, That's a Yeti.